Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion, which includes really distinguished guests, parliamentarians, legal specialists, and human rights advocates. And we will be discussing a pressing international issue, which is how can South Africa's case against the Israeli occupation be supported in the International Court of Justice? The focus will be to thoroughly scrutinize the case, delve into the charges, evidence, and legal arguments put forward, and offer a detailed analysis from both legal and humanitarian standpoints. We will be starting if Professor Francis Boyle is with us, who will be speaking to us on the detailed legal grounds for holding Israel accountable in the ICJ case for genocide against Gaza. I suppose Professor Francis isn't with us right now. So if we could then start with Matt Carthy, it will be reflecting on mobilizing European parliaments to pressure governments to join South Africa's case against Israel at the ICJ. So.
Thank you, and it's great to be here with you all today. And I have to say that in bringing the case against Israel to the International Court, the Court of Justice, South Africa has shone a light for many new people on the humanitarian catastrophe that has been unleashed in Gaza. The South African government, in our view, has therefore done humanity a great service in taking the stand that they have and in bringing this case. The case against Israel that was presented by the South African legal team was absolutely compelling. Irish people in particularly, and I want to say this, are very proud of the contribution of Blinne ní Gráille, who set out in very stark, indisputable terms that Israel is in gross violation of international law, and that, as I believe it, that Israel is in breach of the Genocide Convention. On the other hand, the Israeli arguments to the ICJ amounted to pure deflection, and that is because, of course, there is no justification for the actions in Gaza that have resulted now in the deaths of well over 23,000 people, including over 10,000 children. Those actions, as we know, have included the deliberate killing of civilians, the intentional targeting and destroying of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, including schools, and also has included the collective punishment, the denial of water, food, fuel, emergency medical supplies to a civilian population, and the forced displacement of virtually every single resident in Gaza. And meanwhile, we also know that Israeli violent actions in the West Bank continue to intensify. I have to say it's deeply regrettable up until this point that the Irish government have thus far refused to support the South African case. That is the case across Europe. In fact, one European government has indicated in the case of Germany that they intend to support the Israeli position. Absolutely an indefensible position. But for those countries like Ireland, whose governments have said many of the right things in respect of Israeli breaches of international law, their arguments for refusing to support South Africa in their case are unconvincing and, in fact, are contradictory. We have the Taoiseach, our Deputy Prime Minister. His approach has been to attack the opposition for simply requesting that he take meaningful action. And he knows, for example, that Sinn Féin, as the main opposition party in Ireland, have constructively engaged with government on this issue, and we have welcomed positive interventions that the Irish government have initiated. But he also knows that we want strong words to be matched by strong action that will actually help bring an end to the slaughter that we're seeing in Gaza. And that, I believe, is the position of the vast majority of Irish people also. Our Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar's position, he has moved in some ways from a position of actually making an argument against the South African case to stating that he actually hopes then that the ICJ makes the interim ceasefire order that the South African case seeks as a first measure. And then he suggests that somehow there may be a role for Ireland without specifying what that role may be, because he then further contends that Israel will simply ignore any such provisional order that might come from the ICJ. So I would argue very strongly that the time for Ireland and for like-minded countries that are proud of having a consistent approach to international law, the time to act is now. The time to stand up for international law, for international humanitarian law, for the UN Charter is now. There must be a consistency of approach. Ireland, for example, has joined an ICJ case under the Genocide Convention brought against Russia in respect of their invasion of Ukraine. We support the Irish government's position in that. But in order to be credible, states and governments have to be consistent. It is not good enough to simply condemn breaches of international law. We have to be consistent in how we respond to that. And the international community has a responsibility to end the barbarity that we are seeing and witnessing in Palestine, and Israel must be held to account. And I think that Ireland and states like Ireland can and must follow South Africa's lead by working with others to show the decisive leadership and help bring an end to the decades-old policy of Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people, which we know has caused such destruction, mayhem, catastrophe in Gaza in particular over the past number of months. We are now witnessing a humanitarian and health catastrophe unfolding before our eyes, and the time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Claudia Webbe MP to speak to us about the role of the UK Parliament in pressuring the government to stop arming Israel and supporting South Africa's case. Ma'am. Since I'm not able to hear.
Hi, my apologies. Okay, I don't think you can see me. I'm trying to unmute. There you go. You can see me now, which is great. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. Well, it's evening here in the UK. The situation in Gaza is horrific. As we know, according to the latest Euromed monitor, more than 100,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, wounded, or are missing under rubble. 32,000 are dead, 3/4 of them women and children. Children are dying of heart attacks because of the fear, stress, and sleep deprivation. Many of those wounded have suffered horrific injuries. 10 children a day are undergoing amputations without anesthetics. Israeli war crimes abound, collective punishment, deprivation of food, water, and fuel, forced transfer, the bombing of schools and hospitals, even those run by the UN, blocking and attacking medics and ambulances trying to reach the wounded, summary executions, and the public humiliation of prisoners. The use of white phosphorus, which can burn through bone on populated areas, as confirmed by Amnesty International. The targeting of journalists and their families, killing more journalists in 100 days than died in the whole of World War II, and much more. The shooting of 3 Israeli men waving white flags and calling out in Hebrew raises terrifying questions about what Israeli ground forces must be doing to unarmed Palestinians. And the blockade of vital supplies is about to take an even more terrible toll. 80% of the world's people suffering the most acute starvation are now living in Gaza, according to the Action Against Hunger. And the World Health Organization has warned that disease is about to pose a bigger threat to life in Gaza than bombs and bullets. Israel has made its intentions very clear: genocide and ethnic cleansing, as South Africa showed powerfully in its case before the International Court of Justice last week. Yet our UK government put its name to a genocide accusation 7 weeks ago against Myanmar for its treatment of Rohingya children, both the UK government and His Majesty's official opposition, the Labour Party, continue to support Israel's actions, not just with words, but with military support, even bombing Yemen without parliamentary approval to try to prevent it limiting shipping to Israel. And while dropping bombs on Yemen, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has claimed that South Africa's application to the International Court of Justice endangers peace and is completely unjustified, therefore, and wrong. Despite the relative one-sided media coverage in the UK, the latest polling suggests that more than 3/4 of British voters believe there should be an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, a level of support that varies little no matter which party they supported. Yet the government and His Majesty's official opposition, the Labour Party, both worked to defeat a parliamentary motion calling for a ceasefire that I and others voted for. The UK's political establishment is directly at odds with the will of the electorate and has tried to quell public anger by talking about humanitarian pauses and with claims to support a two-state solution, even though Israel's ambassador to the UK has flatly rejected ever allowing Palestinian statehood, instead saying that flattening Gaza is the only viable solution. So we've seen the Israeli newspaper Haaretz has pointed out the deep-rooted anti-Semitism that drove the Balfour Declaration that led to the founding of Israel, with leading figures hoping to rid Britain of its Jewish citizens. And as the nation responsible for that declaration, which led to the founding of modern Israel, the UK has a particular responsibility to do everything it can to resolve the catastrophe in Palestine and end the slaughter and forced transfer of 2 million people. Yet our political class has not only abdicated that responsibility, but it's actively fueling what Israeli ministers have boasted is a new Nakba. As a member of parliament, I am absolutely appalled at the levels of complicity and apologism that I see around me, heartened only by the clear mass public solidarity and outcry in the UK and around the world. I stand with those who are protesting. I attend the marches every week here in the UK. The UK public outcry is clear. And I stand by the spirit and resilience of the Palestinian people. I will continue to do everything I can in my power to change the bad and support the good. We're talking about essentially what Israel is doing is a war against humanity. The people that come onto our streets week in, week out in the UK, I believe, are on the right side of history. They are challenging this war against humanity and really standing up to the inhumanity that they are witnessing. Thank you for your time and solidarity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Joining us next will be a member of Turkish Parliament, Mustafa Kaya, who will be addressing Israeli occupation through international law and Turkey's parliamentary perspective and role in supporting South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice. So, I think you would need to unmute yourself.
Yes. Now it's okay, I think. Yes. First of all, I would like to thank all of you sincerely for giving me this opportunity. I greet you all with respect. A disaster has been underway in Gaza for more than 100 days before the eyes of the whole world. Zionist Israel, violating international law, is committing the largest massacres since the massacres of World War II. During this period, Israel killed 25,000 people and wounded at least 70,000 people. And she succeeded to some extent in the evacuation of Gaza, which was one of the most painful aspects of the situation. Zionists evicted 2 million Gazans from their homes and sent them out to the Egyptian border. The killers bombed heedlessly hospitals, mosques, churches, schools, and even innocent people who fled their homes. In fact, there is no need to explain further the massacres committed by Israelis here. Both valuable media organizations, NGOs like you and our Gazan brothers convey what is happening to the whole world. The important thing is exactly what we politicians can do here. The Gaza genocide could drag our entire region and even humanity into a great disaster. Urgent steps must be taken both to alleviate the suffering in Gaza and for the future of our region. As the Milli Görüş Movement's Saadet Party, we have always kept an eye on Palestine very vigilantly, like all global developments. Since the years of when our founding leader, the late Necmettin Erbakan, entire politics in the 60s. Moreover, we have always followed this problem with the more attention and with the great interest because of Masjid al-Aqsa is located in Palestine. Palestine is an Islamic land, and these places are part of the Ottoman legacy. We have always provided political roadmaps and solution proposals for the problem. We have always carried out important implications on Palestine during our period when we both in power and in opposition, and we will continue to do so. Staying true to our political line, after October 7, we as the Saadet Party announced some plans to alleviate the pain in Gaza. A ceasefire is needed first in Gaza. Israel's attacks must stop and increase in casualties must halt. In order to secure a ceasefire, Islamic world should resolve on a global embargo, just as it embargoed the Soviet Union during the invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, or Israel and USA in 1973. The embargo does not necessarily need to be imposed by only Islamic countries. We should do it all over the world. This process will develop further when several countries begin embargoes. The USA and Europe, especially those with supply chains, will force Israel to a ceasefire. Then the aid provided to the region should be extended further. In particular, the intake of food, clothing, shelter, and medical supplies should be amplified. Hospitals that had stopped their operation due to attacks must be reactivated. Field hospitals should be established. Patients whose conditions are serious and whose treatment are not possible in Gaza should be brought to Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Jordan, and other Islamic countries. Gazans who fled their homes should be returned to their homes and the region should be rebuilt. The number of cases filed against Israel in the International Criminal Court should be increased, and Israel should be convicted as genocidal state. Israel must pay compensation and guarantee that it will not attack Palestine again. after a new negotiations process covering all Palestinian segments should begin. With this genocide is that the Israelis are losing their sympathy and the world, and as they continue to murder and harm innocent people. I personally hope that in the near future, the Palestinians would come to a position to establish their independent state as they pain the whole world's sympathy. We know this type of power when Gandhi won a victory against colonizers and Martin Luther King when the Black people achieved their freedom. We can see the building of this power day after day, and the victory is very close for the Palestinians. We only wish that this victory would not come at the expense of so many innocent lives. We only find solace in the recent developments of Israel losing this unproportioned war, and Palestinians are winning not only the sympathy and hearts of the world community, but also political support for the mindful politicians all over the world. From this day, nothing will be the same for the Palestinians, as they cannot be deprived of their right to have peaceful life with the least minimum human rights in their homeland anymore. And I'm finishing it. Sorry. The case filed by the Republic of South Africa in the International Criminal Court is very important. We hope that with this case, Israel will be convicted for the first time, and Israel will be officially recognized as genocidal. For this reason, as the word press, non-governmental organizations and political parties, we must make more publicity about the case filed by the Republic of South Africa and disseminate the evidence it presents. The whole world must see that South Africa is not alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We will now be having a member of the Irish Parliament with us, Richard Boyd Barrett, who will be exposing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the role of the Irish Parliament in international human rights advocacy.
Thanks very much, Insignia. Yeah, look, this weekend we saw by far the biggest mobilization of people in Ireland in solidarity with the people of Gaza to express their outrage at the genocide that has been inflicted on the people of Gaza for more than 3 months now, the wholesale slaughter of, probably, when you include those who are buried under the rubble and missing, well in excess of 30,000 people, virtually the entire population displaced, people on the brink of famine, and the infrastructure necessary to sustain human existence in Gaza having been systematically and deliberately destroyed by Israel in front of the eyes of the world. And there was outrage on the streets of Dublin, as there has been across the world in many of your countries and across the globe, on an unprecedented scale that we have seen escalate over the last 3 months as the horror in Gaza has unfolded. But a huge part of that mobilization was support for the, frankly, heroic action of the South African government in taking the case to the International Court of Justice against Israel for genocide, for breaching the Genocide Convention. And I think anybody who listened to the South African legal team, they clearly presented an irrefutable case of genocide that Israel has done all of the things that are defined as genocide in the Genocide Convention, and they have discharged their legal responsibilities as a signatory of the Genocide Convention in actually taking action. And in Ireland, frankly, many of the people who are on the streets, much of the political opposition, are outraged that the Irish government have failed, as have many, many other countries who are signatories to this convention, have failed to publicly support and formally intervene to support the South African genocide case against Israel. Of course, it is so appropriate that South Africa should lead that case as a country that has been a victim of apartheid and of colonialism, and understand that the horror that those things entail. But in Ireland, certainly, I think the majority of people are ashamed of our government, because Ireland also has been a historic victim of colonialism, of imperialism, of a system of apartheid very similar to the one visited on the people of Palestine for decades. And the fact that our government has refused to support that action is a matter of embarrassment and shame for the people of this country. And outrage at that was expressed on the streets of Dublin this week. And in fact, in November, I put forward a motion in the Irish Parliament appealing to the Irish government at that stage to initiate action under the Genocide Convention because of the genocide. At that point, there were 14,000 people dead, murdered by Israel in Gaza. Today, there are nearly 30,000 dead. And the government at that time voted against initiating that action, and this week refused even to allow a debate in the Irish Parliament about South Africa's case. Absolutely shameful. And that shame hangs over every government who has signed that convention. Because not only the point about the Genocide Convention is it's not just about holding a country accountable after the fact for committing genocide. The convention confers an obligation on every single signatory, more than 150 countries, to do everything in their power to take unilateral action, as well as going to the court itself, to prevent the commission of genocide. And every government who has signed that convention and has failed to impose sanctions on Israel for what it is doing are in breach of their legal obligations under that convention. And a very important aspect of the convention is the question of complicity and incitement. And to be honest, I believe, as well as Israel being in the dock for genocide and for open and public incitement to genocide, which we saw from leading military, political and officials from Israel, there should be other countries in the dock for complicity and incitement who have provided a justification for Israel's genocidal attack in Gaza, who have given active support, and most notably the United States, Britain, countries in Europe that are supplying them with arms, continuing to trade with them. All of them, in my opinion, are complicit with Israel's genocide against the people of Gaza and should be held to account. And all I would say is I would just urge, I know I don't have to convince anybody on this call, but I think we have to do everything we can to pile on the pressure on our governments to discharge their responsibilities under the Genocide Convention to join the case. Our own government tried to lie to the Irish public by suggesting that unless you were a direct party to the conflict, you couldn't join the legal action. South Africa has shown that to be a complete nonsense. But also we've seen Germany now formally say they are going to intervene on Israel's behalf, disgracefully on Israel's behalf. And I think that puts all the more obligation on all of us to force our countries to intervene on behalf of the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine who are a victim of this appalling genocide. And history will judge very, very harshly people who stand by and fail to act and discharge their responsibilities to prevent the commission of an ongoing genocide, which uniquely is taking place in front of the eyes of the world, live on television, live on social media. It is beyond obscene. But if there is one hope in all of this, it is the tremendous resistance and resilience of the Palestinian people themselves, and of the enormous, unprecedented solidarity we have seen of ordinary people across the world demanding an end to this horror, but also, finally, highlighting the fact Israel is not a normal state. Israel is a state that is built on ethnic cleansing. It is built on occupation. It is built on apartheid. And the massacre we're seeing now is the logical outworking of a state that is built on that sort of uncivilized, barbaric regime. And I hope, just like with apartheid South Africa, and indeed with colonialism in this country, this will be the beginning of the end of the occupation of Palestine, of the apartheid regime of Israel, and that we will finally, out of this horror, see the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea.
Thank you so much. That was really powerful. I would like to invite Professor Francis Boyle, who is a lawyer and international law expert, and he will be detailing the legal grounds for holding Israel accountable in the International Court of Justice case for genocide against Gaza.
Assalamu alaikum. You hear me?
Yes, we
Thank
can.
you for having me on. Yes, I predict that South Africa will win and order provisional measures of protection on behalf of the Palestinians against Israel, unless, of course, massive political pressure is applied to the members of the court. I say that for the following reasons. I was the first lawyer ever to win anything from the World Court on the Genocide Convention on behalf of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina against Yugoslavia to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against the Bosnians. It was massive, overwhelming victory that I argued all by myself. There was no team of lawyers. And then I won a second World Court order for the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina against Yugoslavia to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against the Bosnians. Once again, massive, overwhelming. I argued it all by myself, no team of lawyers. In addition, I won a third order, what's known as an Article 74, Paragraph 4 order from the president of the court to the same effect that was likewise binding on the parties. No lawyer has ever done this in the history of the World Court.
So, I'm so sorry to cut you off. Would you be able to adjust your camera slightly?
Sure.
I'd be able to see you better. That's great. Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. I also convinced the prosecutor for the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia to indict my adversary, Slobodan Milosevic, the president of Yugoslavia, for almost every crime in the ICTY statute, including 2 counts of genocide, 1 for genocide in Bosnia in general, and the second genocide in particular at Srebrenica. He died on trial in The Hague after the filing a motion to dismiss all charges. The tribunal dismissed his motion, ruling that the prosecution had established enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to convict him on all charges, including 2 counts of genocide. Now, I don't have time here to review 6 hours of oral argument by teams of lawyers on both sides at the World Court. Let me just deal with the most critical components. First, the British lawyer for the Israel argued and lied through his teeth about the meaning and significance of my first World Court order for Bosnia, which was extensively argued back and forth. Let me read for you what my first World Court order said that the British lawyer lied about. Unanimously, the government of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia should immediately, in pursuant of its undertaking in the Genocide Convention, take all measures within its power to prevent commission of the crime of genocide. I won that unanimously. I have been predicting from the get-go that South Africa will win a provisional measure of protection along those lines that South Africa has asked for, modeled on my order. Second, the British lawyer for the Israelis also tried to minimize and distinguish away the third measure of provisional protection I won for the Bosnians against Yugoslavia. Let me quote there. Unanimously, the government of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and the government of the Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina should not take any action and should ensure that no action is taken which may aggravate or extend the existing dispute over the prevention or punishment of the crime of genocide or render it more difficult of solution. I asked for that because I figured we, the Bosnians, would obey and they would disobey. And I intended to trap them in the largest web of crimes that I possibly could, even beyond the Genocide Convention. And the British lawyer for the Israelis tried to just basically brush that away. I predict South Africa has asked for this, modeled on what I won. I predict South Africa will win this. The third order of provisional measures of protection I asked for, I won by 13 votes to 1. Only the Russian judge voting against. Well, of course, Russia was working in cahoots with Yugoslavia. And South Africa has asked for a modified version of this order. It's modified based on what I won. Let me read it for you. The government of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia should in particular ensure that any military, paramilitary, armed units which may be directed or supported by it, et cetera, do not commit any acts of genocide, of conspiracy to commit genocide, of direct and public incitement to commit genocide, or of complicity in genocide, whether directed against the Muslim population of Bosnia-Herzegovina or any other national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. In this case, of course, all they asked for South Africa was such protection for the Palestinians. In the Bosnia case, I was the lawyer. There are about 10 different religious, national, ethnic groups in Bosnia. I got them all protected. These three measures of provisional protection then were reaffirmed in the second World Court order I won for Bosnia. This is the first time ever that any lawyer has won 2 orders in one case since the World Court was founded in 1921. That first measure I quoted to you reaffirms the provisional measure indicated, which should be immediately and effectively implemented. 13 votes to 2. Only the Russian judge and the Serb judge ad hoc voted against me. Third measure I mentioned to you, 14 votes to 1. Again, only the Serb judge ad hoc voting against, the Russian judge favored it, reaffirms the provisional measures indicated in paragraph 52 of the order made by the court, which should be immediately and effectively implemented. And then the last measure I quoted for you, 13 votes to 2, only the Russian judge and the Serb judge ad hoc, quote, reaffirms the provisional measure indicated in paragraph 52A2 of the order, which should be immediately and effectively implemented. So based on this experience, I believe that at a minimum, unless massive political pressure is brought to bear upon the court, which Israel is currently doing, that South Africa will win at least those 3. Now, they've asked for many more. You know, when you litigate before or any court, you ask for the stars and you settle for the sun if you get it. So at a minimum, I think South Africa will get that. What advice do I have before I leave? You should all put pressure on the Arab and Muslim states to sue Israel at the International Court of Justice on the basis of the Genocide Convention. All they have to do is take the South African application, which I have read. It's outstanding. It's excellent. Change the name from South Africa to their own states and then file it with the World Court. That's all they have to do. They need to put massive pressure here. As for my friend there from Ireland, I'm a dual national, Irish and American. He's certainly right about complicity to commit genocide, to be sure, under the Genocide Convention, to be sure, by the Biden administration, the British, the German, and others. They can be sued too. Acting pursuant to my advice, President Izetbegovic gave me authority to sue the United Kingdom at the World Court for aiding and abetting genocide against the Bosnians. So this can be done, yes, for sure. I believe I'm out of my 10 minutes of time. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much, sir, for your intervention. We will now be having Dr. Ralph Wilde, who is an academic and expert in public law, who will be talking to us about encouraging global participation in the ICJ case and the importance of collective action.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you all. Perhaps if I could just start by broadening things out to remind everyone that there are, in fact, 2 cases before the International Court of Justice. One of them, the case that's been referenced so far, which is the genocide case brought by South Africa against Israel. So that's an interstate case. And then separately, there is what's called an advisory opinion case, which is pursuant to a request by the United Nations General Assembly that was made in December of 2022, which asked the court to pronounce upon the legality of the occupation of the Palestinian territory since 1967. So that second case encompasses the particular violation of international law in terms of the commission of genocide, but deals with a much broader set of issues as well. It deals with the very legality of Israel's exercise of military authority over not only the Palestinian Gaza Strip, but also the Palestinian West Bank. It deals with that as a matter of the fundamental issue of whether Israel has a right of self-defense or some other international legal basis for exercising that military authority. It deals with it in terms of the international law of self-determination. Obviously, this is a 50+ year denial of the right of Palestinian self-determination, even if that right is artificially focused on only with respect to those territories, which is the focus of that advisory opinion, which is, of course, a partial focus, but nonetheless, it's useful for what it covers. Now, that broad set of issues then encompasses the specific question of violations of international law by Israel in Gaza since October, but then everything else, and dealing with the West Bank and dealing with the situation since 1967. The hearing in that case is next month. And 47 states and international organizations have submitted written pleadings in that case. And also a significant number of those states and international organizations, this hasn't been made public yet, will be appearing in The Hague at the hearing next month. That begins on the 19th, and a significant number of states and international organizations will be there making these broader legal arguments. So quite apart from the genocide case, which I'll have something more to say in a moment, more immediately, we have these other proceedings. And those proceedings, that case, the advisory opinion case, predates the actions by Israel in Gaza from October onwards. But in terms of the chronology, we'll be addressing things as it were, on the merits much sooner than the genocide case. The genocide case, the hearing that we had last week, was a hearing about a provisional measure, so a sort of emergency request for action by the court to call upon Israel to do certain things and to not do certain other things in order to preserve the rights at issue in that case. But the case itself won't be determined by that court for some time, several years. So we will get that provisional measures decision in the next week or so, presumably before the end of the month, because the composition of the bench on that court is due to change. But that will only be an interim measures order dealing with calling on Israel to do certain things. It won't be a full and final determination of the question of the commission of genocide by Israel. That will have to wait for the eventual full hearing, which, as I say, will not take place for several years. So in relation to that, indeed, states can support South Africa in its action. And one thing that I would mention here that's potentially significant is in terms of how they could support that action. So as has already happened, for example, in the other case concerning genocide before the court, there are two others. One has been brought by the Gambia against Myanmar, and a group of states, European states, intervened in that case to bring the court to the court's attention their view on the legal definition of genocide. Now, the legal definition of genocide is an extremely particular test concerning an intent on the part of Israel with respect to the Palestinian people. It isn't simply about mass killing. It's the additional intent element that this was done for a particular purpose, a genocidal purpose. And so, of course, last week, what we saw before the court was Israel saying this was not for that purpose, this was for self-defense. And that's what that case will hinge on. And the legal test before the court, in terms of its previous case law, has been quite a narrow test. Essentially, the idea being that in the intent to destroy in whole or in part a particular group is the only inference that can be reasonably drawn from the acts in question. And of course, so Israel is saying that's not the only inference. The other inference is self-defense. And whether that should be the legal test is itself in dispute. And so providing assistance to South Africa in making the case for a broader, somewhat looser definition of that test, the intent test, would help South Africa's case. And as I mentioned, a group of states have already done that in relation to the other case concerning Myanmar, the genocide of the Rohingya in Myanmar. So indeed, the very same states in particular, but other states should be called upon to do the same thing in relation to this case. And what's striking, I think what was already mentioned by one of the other speakers, was Germany's decision, this somewhat strange statement issued by Germany in support of Israel's position in the genocide case, is that Germany is one of those states who intervened in the other genocide case, the case about the Rohingya in Myanmar, to make this argument about a broader definition of the intent requirement of genocide. So Germany now is very much under pressure, justifiably, for potentially a double standard when it comes to the position it's taking on this question of genocide. So actually those states in particular, but other states in general, can assist this genocide case brought by South Africa by also intervening in the same way that the group of states did in the other genocide case, to affirm the merit of this broader definition of genocide, which will assist that case when it comes to the court, which, as I say, will not be for several years. But more immediately, we have the hearing on the advisory opinion next month. And the states who will be appearing at that hearing and international organizations are now preparing their submissions and the arguments that they will be making orally before the court. And so now is an opportunity to seek to influence them in what they say at that hearing more immediately in terms of addressing concerns about the position of the Palestinian people and concerns that are not specific to genocide, include genocide, but are more generally in relation to the two fundamental things. Firstly, most importantly, the right of the Palestinian people to freedom, their right to self-determination, and the legal entitlement they have to that, as far as it being prevented through the occupation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank at a bare minimum. And the court will be addressing that issue in that case. And then secondly, within that, the violations of international law in the way that the Palestinian people are being treated by Israel. Of course, now the focus is on the situation in Gaza, but with the violations of international law that are also being perpetrated in the West Bank. And so unlike the genocide case, which is specific to addressing the particularly horrific way that the Palestinian people are being treated in Gaza. The other case is dealing with that issue, but also the illegality of Israel's occupation itself. And this is an opportunity to have that issue addressed and its legality addressed. And all of the states who participate in those proceedings, and presumably their identities will be made public at some point. Some of them have already indicated that they are participating, but the information has not been made public by the court yet. But there will be a significant number of them. So that's very much something else to focus on right now in terms of those states and international organizations. And that hearing will be something to look out for. It will be televised and live streamed in The Hague, beginning on the 19th of October. Thank you. Sorry, the 19th of February.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilde. I would just really like to thank the speakers for waiting. We've, of course, gone over time. So we do apologize for that, but we're going to continue. So thanks, everyone, for your patience. We now have the director of Al-Haq Foundation, Shawan Jabarin, who will be documenting and presenting evidence of human rights violations in Gaza for the ICJ case. You would have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for having me today, with you, and thank you to your guests. I have not listened to what everybody has said in this meeting, which is why I apologize if I repeat anything that has already been said. Let me first stress that the move of South Africa is brave and highly appreciated. It's a step in which South Africa expressed its respect for an abidance by its obligation under the Genocide Convention. The move becomes more important in light of the fact that other international actors and the states have abandoned their legal obligation and the human values, not only by their inaction, but by justifying the commission of genocide against the Palestinian people and even involvement in the commission of the crime directly or indirectly. We are now living a historic moment. Palestinians count on the International Court of Justice to save the little remaining faith in the international legal and justice system, especially after third-party states have failed over the past long years to uphold their legal obligations and bring about justice to Palestinians, including by holding perpetrators of serious crimes against Palestinians to account. What is happening right now in the Gaza Strip is unprecedented in terms of scale and equality of crimes that are perpetrated. Tens of the thousands of Palestinians have been killed and injured. Most of the Gaza Strip has been razed to the ground. Millions have been forcibly displaced. These crimes and many others come as concrete translation of genocidal statements delivered by many Israeli state officials in which they expressed intent to destroy Palestinians. This makes us argue strongly that Israel has committed genocide. In the hearing that was held last week, South Africa provided compelling evidence of this. This is imperative on other accountability mechanisms, especially the ICC, to take concrete steps to conclude the ongoing infestation into the situation in Palestine and include genocide as one of the crimes to investigate. I would like to raise another thing, that there is a case submitted against Biden and also Blinken and the American and the US defense minister before the federal court in California. It will be hearing, it will be here on 26th of this month. And I think it will be open for a public, and it will be a public. And also Al Jazeera can, I don't know, maybe there is a process or procedure to broadcast that one, but it will be broadcasted. That's the one thing also we would like to add, that to use the national jurisdiction also against the states. I finally would like to take this opportunity to bring to the attention of the guests that their states are under legal obligations to prevent genocide, especially the ones whose countries had already ratified the Genocide Convention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We will now have a former lawyer at the International Criminal Court, Diala Chehade, who will be speaking to us about the legal recourse for victims of genocide and how to prevail justice from the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice.
I will be brief since we exceeded the time. I just want to mention one thing regarding the ICJ case is the matter of enforcement of any provisional order that will be issued, because Israel expressed explicitly their intention to not respect such an order. Netanyahu said only a few days ago that The Hague will not stop their operation in Gaza. So the question here, because this is mainly one of the most important questions being raised when it comes to this proceeding before the ICJ. How can you enforce this decision? By law, it should be respected by all the United Nations state parties, because the ICJ is the judicial organ of the United Nations. But what if it was not respected? What if the matter was even referred to the Security Council and the United Nations decided to, the United States, decided for the first time to use the veto against a judicial order, by the judicial organ of the United Nations. So this is something that is yet to be observed. And it is worrying because we don't see the possibility of any international action in terms of international politics against Israel outside the ICJ or on the level of the Security Council, especially that the Israel should be considered as an outlaw state, since it is one of the states that has violated the most United Nations Security Resolution, I think 23 at least resolution, and Israel is also one of the states that has, one of the states that the United Nations Security Council has issued over 130 resolution condemning it in relation to operations against Palestine or the neighboring countries since 1967. When it comes to the ICC, well, there's a hope that the proceedings before the ICJ would encourage the prosecutor of the ICC to take action, especially after numerous INGOs and NGOs and some state parties to the ICC have been submitting either communication under Article 15 of the Rome Statute or evidence on the commitment of crimes falling under the jurisdiction of the ICC, including South Africa, of course, including European International Organization, DON. So the prosecutor of the ICC is not bound by any
I think we may have lost Diala with us. I will reach out to her, but just as our final speaker, I would like to invite Howard Lee, a member of the Malaysian Parliament and sincerely apologize for the wait, especially now that it would be 2 a.m. your time. And really thank you so much for staying with us all the way till the end. Thank you, please.
No worries. Thank you for the invitation. It's for a just cause. Right. I think I'm not going to go over the facts of what's happening on the ground. 104 days of aggression has gone by, and I think the world is very much so aware of what is happening. You know, the crimson tears and insufferable graveyard that Gaza has turned into is now a place of mourning, a place of loss, a place of anger, a place of tears. I would even say it's a place of unhealable pain for generations to come, and that's what was brought forth into the hallowed halls of the International Court of Justice by South Africa. And I think Malaysia, along with Namibia, Bangladesh, and many other countries, Ireland, have joined the chorus of outrage, and it really is now resonating across the globe. Now, let me share a little bit of what Malaysia has done. You know, literally millions of Malaysians have taken to the streets in support, not just in solidarity with their voices and their feet on the ground, but they've also taken money out of their bank accounts and their pockets, using their political will and their humanitarian will to help. Our parliament, the Malaysian parliament, has made a very clear and scathing position over and over again, individual MPs as well, of their condemnation of the Zionist regime of Israel. Our government has echoed parliament's calls and have donated 10 million ringgit, equivalent of about 2 million USD, and have facilitated up to delivered up to about 70 million ringgit. In total, I think it will make up to about 100 million ringgit, equivalent to about 20 million USD in aid to the people of Gaza. We've leveraged off our soft power and our status as a middle power with our Middle Eastern axis of influence and soft power, and our position in the OIC, and have been working with Turkey and many other nations and other partners in pressing for resolutions and actions. The Special Select Committee for International Trade and Foreign Affairs have made our position very clear and is in constant engagement with other countries, those in support of Israel, in making our voices heard against their position, and working with nations who are in support of Palestine and the Palestinian people. The caucus of Palestine and Parliament have made our voices very clear. And I personally have written to the Prime Minister, voiced out in Parliament, and have even called for legal action to be taken against Israel in the ICJ before the action by South Africa materialize. Now, for all those that are now trapped above and under the rubble in Gaza, and some in the West Bank, who are unable and impossible to hold on to any kind of hope and dreams, I think we need to keep that flame of dreams alive for a peaceful future for them. Now, I would say that I would put it into the kind of 6 areas of what we, a global community, need to do. We need to forge a global fortress of solidarity. Let our collective outrage be a tsunami, a tidal wave, whatever you want to call it, in washing away the cries of the oppressed. Secondly, our diplomats, we diplomats, must become warriors of diplomacy. And each word that we say and we write and we publish, we need to use that to dissect the web of deceit, own our arguments and forge alliances, and organize our colleagues, our alumni, our associates worldwide, members of parliament, representatives, to isolate the perpetrators and architects of this suffering, which is obviously Israel. And of course, those who are complicit with them. Third, we call upon the ICJ to be the crucible of justice. Help the ICJ do their work to melt away all these propaganda that is being, stoked by Israel and their allies, revealing the naked, horrific truth that is etched in the blood, with the blood of innocent Palestinian boys, girls, men and women, freedom fighters, and those freedom denied, of lawyers, legal experts, to this global humanitarian suit to ensure justice is delivered. We need to help, be the bandage for the wounded, be the plaster cast for the broken legs and arms of Palestinians, and the whisker, and literally be the whispers of hope in the ears of the despairing and the mourning in Gaza. We need to offer aid. We need to offer help. We need to offer experts. We need to help offer doctors, nurses. Fifth, we need to become storytellers. We need to wield our pens, our keyboards, our computer screens and our Zoom apps to fight this war of propaganda. Tell the stories of the children who have had their laughters taken away, children who have been taken away from their families and from their parents, and we need to tell their stories. And sixth, we must remember that tyrants understand only one language, and that's pressure, economic sanctions, and other forms of sanctions. Now, and I think words alone are not enough. I urge each of you to take the following real concrete actions. Those, what I've just said, the 6 things I mentioned just now, are conceptual mindsets that we must adopt and take. Number 1, of course, spread the word, educate those who are uneducated, raise awareness, build global support networks for Palestinians, both organizations and individuals. 2, pressure your representatives for those who are not representatives. And for those who are representatives, pressure your governments. And for those who are in government, pressure for more and further actions of solidarity. Demand that they stand up for Palestinian people and advocate for a just resolution to this conflict. For fellow parliamentarians, I didn't know there was going to be so many MPs, but for fellow parliamentarians, we must organize ourselves. Lend our voices of representation of our citizens and our nations. Let that be heard by governments. So Malaysians should come together with with Turkish MPs, with European MPs, and go to Europe, go to France, go to the UK to make sure that they know that other countries think they are crazy, stupid, and genocidal for standing with Israel. We need to also support targeted boycotts and divestment campaigns. Hit the perpetrators where it hurts, which is economically. We need to also take legal actions against Israel in our own country on behalf of Palestinians who are living in your country, to render Israel a criminal state if indeed your country recognizes them as a state. And of course, Malaysia does not recognize Israel as a state, but each and every single country needs to offer and organize friendly states together to take further legal actions against Netanyahu and other individuals in Israel's war cabinet, take them to the ICC for war crimes they have clearly already committed. And lastly, we need to amplify humanitarian and Palestinian voices. Let them help them tell their stories and share their experiences and their pleas for justice. And remember, our unity is our strength. Together we really can turn the tide. This has been started, or this bout has been started by South Africa. We need to come together to make sure more actions are taken, and let us build a free and just Gaza. And it can be a testament to a collective action and the relentless pursuit of human rights. Let the river to the sea, and Palestine must be freed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I would just like to invite our panelists who remain with us for any final messages they would like to share with us, hopefully limited to about a minute, since we're already quite over time. If I could start with our members of parliament, Richard Boyle, followed by Mustafa Kaya and Howard Lee, and maybe conclude finally with Dr. Wilde.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank everybody for their contributions. I learned a lot, and there's some great ideas, I think, about how we can take forward the movement of solidarity with the people of Palestine. And the only thing I really would add is that I hope that Francis Boyle is correct. The ICJ make the decision, which is irrefutable in terms of the genocide case. But even if we can get the provisional measures to stop the immediacy of the genocide, there's no going back to just before October the 7th as if everything is okay. The state that is capable of doing this, as I think most of us know, is not a normal state. It's a state that's been built since its inception on ethnic cleansing, on apartheid, on occupation, on the ruthless denial of Palestinian rights. And now is the time when we have to try and educate the world about that reality and expose the sponsors and supporters of a rogue regime, which, like apartheid South Africa, needs to be dismantled in order to have freedom and justice and self-determination for everybody who lives in the land of Palestine, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Jew, whether they're Christian, or whether they are of no religion.
Thank you so much. If I could invite Mustafa Kaya. So you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Zionism is not against only Muslim communities. Zionism is against all humanity because they are believing in that they are the first top of the human, and others can assist them. Because of that reason, religion, ethnicity, colors is not important for them. We have to act together against Zionism. And Kudus, Jerusalem, is the key of the world peace. We have to protect world peace in Middle East. If not, 100%, we will lose everything all over the world. And today, I visited South African Embassy in Turkey to explain my support to them. And we criticized many things with them. And South African action is very important for us. And thank you again for your invitation.
Thank you so much. If we might have Sahawad Lee.
I think it's really important for us to build a global coalition and an alliance of members of parliament. Why? Because there are constitutional provisions invested in us as individuals to speak on behalf of our citizens and our constituents. And I think at the very least, for those honorable members who are here in this room, in this conversation, if we can exchange contacts, I'm sure there are many alliances, but there is never enough alliances to get the message across. We have challenges here, despite the fact that there's almost 96, 97% support of the Palestinian cause here in Malaysia, but we have other challenges in the sense that there is also an overwhelming, I would say, discriminatory notions of, ethno-nationalistic thinking against Jews as opposing to just the Zionistic regime. And these challenges need to be overcome. And for example, there is also some very inaccurate thinking that the entire West, although it's not that far from full accuracy, the entire West is for Israel and everyone else is for Palestine. This needs to be corrected. And this can only be corrected if there are faces of the West I hate saying that, that lends its course to the Palestinian cause, and have those faces and those voices and conversations like these be shown to those who think this is a matter of skin color. This is not a matter of skin color. This is not a matter of religion. This is a matter of humanity being raped by Israel, and we need to address that. And the only way to address that is if we were to bind ourselves together. So all honorable members of parliament, I offer my phone number, I offer my email, I offer my 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Let's continue these conversations on a one-to-one basis or in a much smaller group basis. So I look forward to speaking to and working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We finally have Dr. Wilde.
Thank you very much. I just end by pointing out that because Israel's occupation violates fundamental areas of international law, all other states are in a special international law position. They have negative and positive obligations. They're not entirely free in their behavior in relation to this situation, as if it is only Israel that bears legal rights, bears legal obligations. So they're legally obliged not to recognize this as lawful or to provide any aid or assistance to Israel's use of force. So this means necessarily not affirming that Israel has a right to use this force, and also being obliged to cease support, including military support, to Israel for this purpose. They also have positive obligations to bring this illegal situation to an end, which means at a bare minimum calling for a ceasefire and more broadly calling for Israel to end the occupation. States need to face up to the more comprehensive nature of their legal position that they're in. If, as they affirm, international law is indeed law, then by definition, it is universally applicable and not simply something to observe insofar as it aligns with their political preferences. So if this is the case, then on these fundamental matters where all states are legally implicated, they aren't free to be selective and to apply double standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists and our audience for their engagement. We, of course, are reminded of the suffering that is continuing to unfold. And just as we continue this, just as we conclude this panel, we have a short recorded message from the former Italian Member of Parliament, Michele Piras. And of course, we express our unbridled solidarity for everyone in Palestine. If we could have the message, please.
Good afternoon to everyone, and especially thanks to the Arab Organization for Human Rights in Britain for this kind invitation. As everyone knows, we are coming out from over than 100 days following the events of October 7th. And we have to recognize the first fact, that nothing will be as it was because of two main reasons. The first is that the happening in Palestine have definitively broken the wall of silence built on the Palestinian issue in the last decades. The second reason is that the disproportionate Israeli reaction dragged the whole world faced with a bloody scenario that is almost unprecedented after the Second World War. On one side, the massacre in the Gaza Strip is before everyone's eyes. Over than 25,000 deaths, 10,000 children, 60,000 injured, almost 2 million displaced, represents something unacceptable, even for those who believe in the right of Israel to self-defense. On the other side, 100 days of indiscriminate bombings, 350,000 of housing units destroyed, and about 2 million of people suffering crisis level of food insecurity clearly shift the point of view towards something more than a war against Hamas, and Israel, as Israeli would like to portray it. And although terms such as genocide and ethnic cleansing should always be used sparingly and carefully, we can no longer hide the truth we have before us. Just as we cannot ignore the delusional declaration of Netanyahu's government representatives. We are clearly faced with a case of ethnic cleansing as a direct result of the ongoing occupation policy and of the international inactivity. Therefore, just to answer to the main question of this seminar, the South Africa case in the ICJ has to be supported by a widespread campaign and a widespread movement. We need to shift where possible the national government's position. That's, for example, what the Italian left is trying to obtain, even in a difficult condition in which the far-right majority in Italy strongly supports Israel and Netanyahu's government. And some more context consideration. In the recent years, everyone got used to the accusation of anti-Semitism that has been used as a cudgel and a threat against personalities and politicians who dares to criticize the systematic violation of human rights and international law in Palestine. The defeat of such kind of improper use of the term has to be a priority for every one of us, for everyone who stands for democracy in the old continent. Actually, we know perfectly well that anti-Semitism, as well as Islamophobia and other unacceptable forms of racism, are alive and kicking in Europe and the rest of the world. But let me say clearly that just as we firmly reject any form of racism, we equally consider it offensive to be accused in the face of the claim for the Palestinian people's rights that should be recognized for all people, without any exception and without any ideological justification for their denial. The current situation is an atomic bomb placed in the heart of the Mediterranean area and the Middle East, just as it is necessary to acknowledge that the escalation of the conflict is already a harsh reality, as well as the two-state solution cannot at this moment be considered, unfortunately, more than an illusion. So what we need is not only the weak request for what is obvious, namely the ceasefire and the entry into the script of the humanitarian organizations. What we need is a powerful action for a lasting peace. That means one independent state of Palestine, the end of the occupation, an international plan and an international mission to develop peace factors in Palestine and ensure the full right for self-determination to the Palestinians. And last but not least, I think that a peaceful resolution of the Palestinian issue is a direct interest for Europe. It is strategic for the Union and for the European countries building an Euro-Mediterranean area of peaceful exchange and cooperation. Also for this reason, we need an action to put an end to the Netanyahu's far-right government. And particularly the closest friends of Israel should work for that. I'm really convinced that we should no longer live in the hypocrisy of calling democracy an apartheid regime and calling self-defense the occupation of a foreign land. It is a matter of coherence between our fundamental values and our effective acts. If you want peace, act for peace. If you want justice, act for justice. There is no third way that doesn't take into account the tragic possibility of even more widespread conflict. In Europe, faced with a turning point that has occurred in recent months, can no longer afford to stammer without risking being definitively considered co-responsible for what happens to a people and the whole area. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to our audience. And on this note, we would conclude this panel. It was really such a pleasure to have everyone and hear your interventions. Thank you so much.
Just a quick question. Will we be able to have access to the recording at all?
Yes, we will send it to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Cheers.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.